And I'm sure that the wonderful panel that is there here today will surely guide us all in that direction. Today, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce you to today's panelists who are the stalwarts of their field. Firstly, what do I say about him? He is an IIM Kolkata educated banker turned award winning author. He is a household name in India. Passionate about history, mythology, and philosophy, he finds beauty and meaning in all religions. His 7 books have sold over 5 million copies and have been translated into dozens of languages. He has also been listed as the 100 most influential celebrities in India for 4 years in a row by Forbes magazine. He has also been honored with the Society Young Achievers Award for Literature in 2013 and was also selected as an Eisenhower Fellow for outstanding leaders from around the world. Yes, guys, it's Amish Tripathi. Sir, a wholehearted welcome to you on behalf of everyone. Namaste. We are sure that your presence will captivate and inspire many young learners that there are here. Next up, we have Sai Swarupa Ayerma. Formerly an analyst with a venture capital firm, Sai Swarupa ma'am's interests include startups, economics, Carnatic music, philosophy, politics, history, and literature of India. She holds an MBA from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. An avid reader and writer, her notable works include much famed Abhaya, The Legend of Diwali, Avishi, Vishapala of Rigveda reimagined, Draupadi, Tale of an Empress, Rukmini, the Krishna's wife. Think India, ma'am, looks forward to learning a great deal about India's untold sagas and legends. We look forward to learn about the culture that you have inherited from the ancestors and are following till the date with the pride. A very warm welcome to you.
Thanks a lot.
Namaste. Next up, we have Manushi Sinha. Manushi Sinha is a writer by passion and an editor by profession. She is a postgraduate in English from the University of Pune. She has authored 8 books, including 2 books on Krishna, the 8th Avatar, and the Blue Acquisition. Her latest book, titled Saffron Swords, is indisputably a great read. She has 3 collaborative authorship projects to her credit. One, a new approach to practical English grammar, selected latest essays, and DGP English Improvement Course, which is a bestseller. Manushi is the founder of MyIndiaMyGlory.com, an e-magazine that features India from the past to the present with a special focus on its history and its heritage. Ma'am, I'm sure that our audience will draw all the courage and strength from the robust personality that you are. A very warm welcome.
Okay, thanks, Sabaji.
We have the next we have, and I take very endearment while introducing her, which is Sahana Vijay Kumar, who is a native of Mysore city. Srimati Sahana is a captivating writer. Her novel, Kashira, a diabolical betrayal of Kashmiri Hindus, has been widely acclaimed since its release and has seen 5 prints to the date. In addition to English, Kashira is also being published in Hindi and Marathi. All her Kannada works have been published by renowned Sahitya Bhandar. She has also been a prominent speaker at various other literature festivals. Think India can only thank Srimati Sahana for agreeing to grace our fest and enlighten the young minds about the unsung sagas and legends of India. Welcome you, ma'am. Next up, we have Sri Ratnakar Sadasulyaji. Ratnakar Sadasulyaji is an IT professional who writes code for a living and writes when free to keep his sanity intact. Also a blogger and now starting out as a self-published author with varied interests in history, science, and Indian culture. He believes that knowledge is to be shared, and he is an advocate that he is learner for life. Having a keen interest in history and passion for writing, he has authored City of Victory, a book on Vijayanagara Empire. He is also interested in quizzing movies and music. He has also blogged about history under your feet and also a book named after this. He is one of the most popular writers and he is also among the top writers of Quora. We look forward to learn a great deal about our untold legends from his immense knowledge. I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. Namaste. And last up, we have the dynamic moderator for today, Abhinav Agarwal ji. Abhinav Agarwal ji is a Mahabharat enthusiast, the curator of Indic Book Club, a prolific reviewer, a columnist on technology and Indology, the author of a fictional thriller, Predators and Prey, and he's also a data software expert from past 2 decades. He holds a gold medal from Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore and is a computer engineer. Sir, I welcome you to today's session. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to our Sarthi for today. Like Krishna would not have been possible, like Mahabharata would not have been possible without Krishna. Our session today will not be possible without our moderator, Abhinav Agarwal ji. Sir, handing it over to you.
Abhinav, you need to unmute.
Yeah. Yes. Sir, you're not audible.
Tanya.
One would think that after so many years, this would not be happening, but it does. So it's more a reflection of, I think, the individual than the technology. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And it is a great honor and delightful experience to have all of our panelists today. And I'll start off by saying that there are more questions that I personally want to ask and can be covered in the time that we have. And so do our I think participants will have an equal number of questions. So what I would suggest is that if the participants have any questions, you can send them in chat, and towards the end, we will take them up. Now, what I wanted to begin with is I'll ask one question to each one of you, and then we will open it up to the entire panel. And there are several questions that I have that would be applicable to more than one of you. So I'll start with you, Amish. So your first 2 series on Shiva and then Ramchandra trilogy that you have written, they became the fastest and the second fastest best-selling series in the history of Indian publishing. Now, it is not as if stories of Lord Rama or Lord Shiva have not been around. They've been with us for thousands and thousands of years, and yet what you wrote evidently struck a chord with, and I'm talking about literally millions of readers in India and across the world, and not just in English. Even they were published in English, they have been translated into many, many languages. So obviously it touched a chord with readers. But I want to ask you, what drove you to write this series, and what part of you thought you could reimagine these characters and these epics in a way that had probably not been done before?
I think if one is honest, there's this lovely line I had heard once, that no Indian hears the Ramayana for the first time. We are born with it. It's probably true of the Mahabharata as well. We're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. Every other pre-Bronze Age culture is dead. Them were killed. They didn't die naturally. They were killed by invaders. So same invaders attacked us as well. We are still here. Various reasons for why we survived. One is, of course, the bravery of our ancestors, but I think also because what is culture at the end of the day? It is the stories that you believe in, the philosophies that you follow, the clothes that you eat, the food that the clothes that you wear, the food that you eat. It's a combination of things. And we still, till today, remember stories that our ancestors told each other 5,000, 10,000 years ago. And I think a reason for that is we had this unique combination, which many other cultures didn't have, that we could take the best of the old, but add in something of the new. We did that repeatedly. many modern Indians believe that Lakshman Rekha is there in the Ramayana. The original Valmiki Ramayana actually is not there. It's there in the Ramcharitmanas, composed by Goswami Tulsidas ji. There are so many versions of the Ramayana. There's the Ananda Ramayana, in which there's a battle between Lord Dashrath and Ravan close to the sea at the beginning, and I was inspired by that and put it in my book. So this thing of keeping the soul of the old and adding in something of the new has been a rich tradition in India, and I think this is one of the reasons our stories remain alive, which is a part of what keeps our culture alive. Because our roots go very deep, but it gets refreshed once again, every few generations. I can't say I was strategically thinking all this when I was writing. That would be a lie. I've said it often that I believe my stories are the blessings of Lord Shiva. I know there are some the media who laugh at this. I don't care. I genuinely believe it. And I write what comes to me. So perhaps it's best if the credit is given where it's deserved. I didn't think that that this is what I should do. This is what will work to the youth. I wasn't thinking all that. I was just writing what came to me. It's Lord Shiva's blessings.
Thank you, Amish. Very true that for instance, if someone were to ask me, I wouldn't be able to say when I first heard the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. For as long as memory has been with me, those stories have been with me, and I'm sure that's true for literally, tens of crores, hundreds of millions of Indians. Sai, my next question is for you. So, you started off a slightly different path. You started off with fiction that was rooted in our Puranas. So, Abhya and Avishi and then Mori, and then you turned with Draupadi, and now lately most recently with Rukmani, with a retelling of those two characters from the Mahabharata. Now, again, my question is that while the first three books were purely fictional imaginations with a canvas that was our the Mahabharata and all, what part of reimagining those stories and those characters led you to move from Avishi, Abhya, Mori and on to Draupadi and Rukmani?
You mean to say the lesser popular and fictional characters to the more popular characters? So one thing, Abhinav, is that all women from ancient India were unique in their own all women as well as men. But every female heroine, the protagonist from our ancient epics had a unique journey. So there is no one model, one role model as such. So that is especially Mahabharata is a testimony for that, because we have Shakuntala, we have Savitri, we have Draupadi, we have Rukmini. So each woman, including her childhood, her marriage, and the way she stands up to whatever she faces, and the way she prevails, all of them are unique in their own way, right? And yes, I started off with not so popular narratives, because they offer the first reason was that they ride on this very strong canvas, very rich canvas laid by Bhagwan Vedavyasa. And also with these not so popular stories, as a storyteller myself, there is a lot of ground to explore. And it also continues a tradition, a literary tradition, especially which is very popular in Telugu literary tradition called Prabandhas. I am sure Ratnakarji would be knowing much more, much deeper about this. So Prabandhas, they started in Telugu literature. They started somewhere around 13th century, reached a peak along with the peak of Vijayanagara, that is the 15th, 16th centuries, where a poet explores a very small episode from Puranas or Itihasas, blows it up into a full-length work. It was the poetic, Prabandhas were poetical at that time. So each, like say you were what is the Swarothisha Manu Sambhavam, which is a small episode in your Markandeya Purana, is grown into a 1,000 poem work by Alasani Peddana, who is the court poet of one of the Ashtadigajas in the court of Krishna Devaraya. So that is the rich tradition of Indian literature, where we take up these unexplored or underexplored stories and also recast them into our contemporary, or try to examine how those immortal characters would have dealt with our kind of stories. So the reason that I wanted to explore, say, Rukmini and Draupadi were mostly because they were, there are a lot of misunderstandings caused because of the other re-exploring of, other reimaginations of Mahabharata especially. And as Amishji pointed out, a lot of modern retellings became more popular than the original Vyasaji's Mahabharata, itself. And there is a need to rediscover the magic of Veda Vyasa, which is why I reverted to Draupadi. That was my endeavor when I started reimagining Draupadi's life as an empress. So sorry, I have an interruption here. I'm so sorry. Yes, so that was the reason.
Thank you, Sai. I'll turn to Sahana next. So your latest book, Kashir, right, and translated very nicely, by Hemant into English, and which is how I got to know of that book. It's a searing look at the Kashmiri Hindu Pandit exodus more than 3 decades ago, and you. So one question that I have, or I'm sure some people may have, is that this is in recent memory, so to say. It's in the living memory of most of us that this happened. Why do you think this needed a retelling? There are some books that have come out. So what aspect of that entire human tragedy that that took place has not been adequately covered, or what drove you to write that book?
The unfortunate thing about the entire Kashmiri Pandit community, Abhinav, is the story is not told at all. It's not a retelling because one thing that very much intrigued me was I've always looked at these predatory Abrahamic religions with a lot of curiosity, because of the nature of their inception, because of the violence that they have instigated, because of the huge losses that they have caused, not just the lives, the civilizations. I mean, we can talk a lot about how within a few years Syria, Persia, Egypt lost their civilizations. So when I looked at it, I used to be a columnist. Kashir is my second novel. The first was a contemporary. So when I was a columnist, I started introducing myself to Islam, the life of the Prophet, etc. And then it was very clear to me that the first prey in India was Kashmir, and none of us had actually realized it. I mean, down south, we did not know what Exodus actually meant. We did not know what the root cause was. We did not know something of this nature happened, something of this, magnitude happened in our own country, and Kashmir was not in our list of places that we visit. It by default used to get ruled out. I mean, we all fancied traveling to places outside India. I mean, we never bothered to know what was happening there. And because I started reading Islam a bit seriously, I got to understand. And therefore, in Kashmir, what I've tried to do is do a philosophical comparison of the Sanatana Dharma and the Abrahamic religions. There is a basic outline that I've tried to give in terms of the difference, and the rest is portrayed in the characters and in the nature of the violence that has been, depicted there.
Thank you, Sahana. Thank you very much. So my next question is for Manushi, right? So you have had your website My India My Glory for many years, and you also wrote 2 books on Krishna, the Blue Vanquisher, and I forget the name of the other one. It was the Eighth Avatar, right? So, and then you moved a couple of years back. I think this came out in 2018, Saffron Swords, 2018 or 19. I think it came, the Saffron Swords came out, and it's been hugely appreciated, and it's been a huge bestseller. So obviously you felt a need to cover that aspect of Indian history that had not yet been covered or covered adequately. So what was your driving and what was your motivation in writing Saffron Swords, and what part of Indian history you thought needed to be retold or brought out in a different light?
Yeah, I grew up with these stories of valor.
Your could you increase your volume a little bit, Manushi? It's a little low.
Oh, yeah, now is my voice audible? Still not audible. Is it audible now? So I grew up with these stories of valor featured in the book Saffron Swords, and many more other stories of our warrior ancestors ever since my childhood, because our father used to narrate to all of us 6 siblings these stories of valor uh, about how we are surviving today because of the resistance offered by our warrior ancestors over a period of several centuries, right from the 8th century till 1947. And as you have mentioned that I have written 2 books on Krishna and how I shifted from the epics from Krishna's story to these medieval stories of valor, medieval and modern stories of valor. So during my initial years of writing, that is, I started writing at the age of 12, and then that manuscript was never published, it is still there. And my first book was published in 2002, that's a romantic novel. And then thereafter, I wrote several books. It's on grammar. And then I wrote 2 books on Krishna and then Saffron Swords. So I thought that I should read a lot more number of books. And I also thought of visiting, exploring various historical sites and collect more material, because whatever we portray should not deviate away from truth. There should be a lot of facts, evidences, but there are also many archaeological evidences, especially inscriptions on many of the stories of valor. For example, Raja Prithu from Assam, he defeated Bakhtiyar Khilji. Bakhtiyar Khilji was the destroyer of Nalanda universities and more universities in India. And but there is no mention in our history textbooks who defeated Bakhtiyar Khilji, who made him bedridden for life so that he could no longer commit any loot or plunder or destroy any more heritage sites. And he died. He was assassinated by his own men because he was bedridden. And through this inscription, we came to know this inscription is there in Kamrupa. It is called the Kanaivarasi rock inscription in Kamrupa, Guwahati. And it's clearly mentioned there in which year the king of Assam defeated Khilji, and how the Muslim soldiers, they were badly defeated, and the surviving soldiers fled for their life, including Khilji. So likewise, there are 3 or 4 inscriptions about Kapaya Nayaka, who re-established Hindu supremacy in the south, in Warangal. And likewise, there are more archaeological evidences. Besides this, there are hundreds of books, hundreds of references on these warriors, right from the 8th century till 1947. So I explored most of the historical sites, each from like located in each and every corner of the country. And then I studied a lot of books. And my husband, Yogaditya Singh Rawal, who is also the co-author of Saffron Swords, he supported me a lot. We both used to travel together, and especially for our exploring this, especially for exploring these sites, we have a 4x4 jeep, so that we could travel to even places where roads are not there. So this way we all visited so many temples where we get a lot more evidences about these warriors and about our past history. And why I thought of writing about these warriors and have given shape to Saffron Swords is because all of these tales of our warriors, our warrior ancestors who offered resistance, and because of whom we are here, carrying forward the legacy of our thousands of years old civilizational identity. So their stories are not being told in our history textbooks. And as Bharatiyas, we have every right to know about our past. We have the right to know why we are here, because of whose sacrifices we are here, because of whose resistance we are here. So that's the reason I wrote Saffron Swords.
Very nice. And you touched upon a point that Amish started off with, and you ended with something that this part of our history is not being told. So with that, I'll ask Ratnakar. So your work, right, whether it's been through your blog History Under Your Feet, or your book on Vijayanagar, and even the book that you turned you turned your blog posts into a book. So they have covered a wide swath of history, right? Many topics that you research and then you write about. But I want to talk a little bit about your book. Your book, the City of Victory, Vijayanagar, it focuses on one place and one particular kingdom. Now, many of us living in the south are probably very well aware of Vijayanagar, but evidently there was something that you felt needed to be brought out to a wider audience that drove you to write that book. Do you want to tell us what drove you, Ratnakar, to write that book?
Okay, see, a couple of things. First things first is, there was a kind of emotional attachment, like being a Telugu person.
Can you increase the volume a little bit, Ratnakar?
You're able to hear me now? Is it okay?
Yes, it would be better if it was a little louder, but this is also fine.
Once, Abhinav, you're able to hear me now? Is this better?
Slightly better.
Hello? Okay. Just let me know you're able to hear me clearly. Is this fine? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things, Abhinav. So one thing is like, see, as a Telugu person, Vijayanagar Empire was something, and it holds true for people from Karnataka also mostly. Vijayanagar Empire, Krishnadevaraya was something which we grew up with, reading stories about Sri Krishnadevaraya, reading stories about Hampi. This empire, this was something which was, it was part of a growing up consciousness. Okay, that was a bit of emotional attachment. Now, if you take, that aside apart, when I started, I did have some idea about Vijayanagar Empire, but even that was mostly about Sri Krishnadevaraya and Tenali Ramakrishna rule. And later, when I actually started on my blog, where I decided to start writing the series on Vijayanagar Empire. Okay, so there I noticed one thing, like the empire actually stood for almost close to 4 centuries in the south, and the significant part I noted was this empire began when most of the existing kingdoms in the south were collapsing or collapsed due to the Islamic invasion. So, the Islamic invasion started in the north, they came down to the south, and all the older kingdoms, the Hoysalas, the the Yadavas of Devagiri, the Kakatiyas, all these kingdoms collapsed. All these kingdoms either were defeated, collapsed, and fell. Just around this time, when all these kingdoms were collapsing, the Vijayanagar Empire emerged, and it was mostly from people of these kingdoms. And it actually started, in a way stood like a sort of a bulwark against this Islamic invasions. And the reason why, and that's the reason why the Hindu kingdoms were able to flourish in the south and the Deccan for a long time, even in the face of these Islamic invasions, unlike in the north, except Rajasthan, where most of the Hindu kingdoms were totally devastated. Okay, so I mean, for almost like 4 centuries, this empire actually stood like a resistance against Islamic invasions, preserving the Hindu culture, preserving the other Hindu kingdoms, and actually, okay, like as you said, like people from the south will be okay, might be having some idea about Vijayanagara Empire, due to Hampi and all, but outside of about the south and all, not. I mean, then if you look at the CBSE textbooks, there's hardly one or two. There's hardly 2-3 pages about Vijayanagara Empire when you have many chapters and chapters devoted to Mughals and Delhi Sultanate. There's nothing about Vijayanagara Empire which flourished for 4 centuries, which had its own style of architecture, which had its own literary contributions, which had its own advances in irrigation technology. I mean, this was an empire that I believe had to be studied in detail and also to be shared. I mean, almost everybody was almost people are been to Hampi. Okay, they marvel at its architecture and everything, but not very aware that the Vijayanagara Empire people actually built up an advanced system of aqueducts and canals that supplied water into Hampi. I mean, that was very significant. Okay, see, because like Hampi, if you have been to Hampi, it's a pretty rocky region. There's hardly, and Tungabhadra, unlike the Ganga, it's not a perennial river. It's like more of a rain-fed river. And in such a amid such a situation, in such a scenario, they managed to build an advanced network of canals and aqueducts that regularly supplied water to Hampi, which was one of the largest systems. And we speak about Romans built aqueducts or the British built aqueducts, but this is something in our backyard and nobody speaks about it, or even the very advanced architecture of the Vijayanagara Empire. So all these are facts which are not known to anybody, and that was a motivation for me to write in the book. I mean, I didn't want my book to be very academic kind of book, so I decided to write it in a format which is like which the layman can understand, a more popular, a more readable, easy to use format. And again, like I told you, because it was a challenge for me covering the four centuries. I mean, we have 4 centuries and 4 different kingdoms. So I had to ensure that the facts were maintained at one place, and people got a good idea about how the empire progressed, and also what was the greatness of Sri Krishnadevara. So these were some of the motivations for me in writing this book, actually.
Thank you, Ratnakar, and thank you all of our panelists for answering these questions. Now, I'll turn this more into a panel discussion. My question is: so, if you look at the entire span of thousands of years, what are in your opinion, some of the areas that you think are underrepresented in modern literature today? Whether and you can talk about anything from periods or places or certain perspectives that you think there is a pressing need for writers to talk about, to bring to the fore today. Anyone can feel free to answer, and if no one answers, then I'll start. Yes, go ahead, Ratnakar.
Okay, so a couple of areas which I feel are pretty much underrepresented in literature. Like, see, post-independence, we fought around 4 wars with Pakistan, Indian Army. Okay, we do this Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, but we actually fought 4 wars with Pakistan. Okay, I mean, sorry, 3 wars with Pakistan, 1 war with India, and you can consider Kargil. There have been a lot of spy missions. This is one area where I feel which has a lot of potential here. Okay, there have been some novels, but like if you take a look at the West, they have umpteen novels which are based on World War II, which are based on spies in World War II, which are based on Cold War. This is some topic waiting to be explored even much more in detail. I mean, there have been books. It's not just the wars. Like, remember one thing, we also fought 3 to 4 full-blown insurgency. Like, we fought the Naxalite insurgency, we fought the Khalistan insurgency, we fought different insurgencies in the Northeast. I mean, you just have a whole lot of stories waiting out there to be told. With this backdrop of the Kashmir insurgency which is going on, and I think this is one area where I'm looking at more, where we can be looking at more books also. Okay, another area where I feel where we can also, which is very much underrepresented, is the modern scientist. if you take science in the 20th century, like, we had our own scientists like Jagdish Chandra Bose or Satyendranath Bose, who have made significant, discoveries and inventions in science, in modern science, which are not being discussed, though their impact is pretty much. Or, beyond Meghnad Saha. So, in books exploring that particular angle about, modern Indian scientists trying to contribute. I mean, that is
Right.
one factor. So I think these are two areas which I feel, of course, like medieval India, you have, like as Manushi has said, thousands of stories are there. I mean, every corner of India, you have a story about somebody who resisted the Islamic rule, who fought back against Islamic rule. You go to every corner of India, I think you can just pick up a story from there. I mean, that's a vast area. So I think these are some of the areas where we can explore.
Very true. Very true.
If I, sorry.
Amish, please.
Yeah, if I can add, I think, I think Ratnakar spoke very well of the things that have been missed in modern India. But if we look at our history, ancient and medieval, one doesn't even know where to begin. Almost everything has been missed. So let me take it from and that actually impacts how we see ourselves today as modern Indians. So firstly, the obsessive focus on Delhi in our history. I'm not against Delhi. It's an important city. I don't deny that. But it's not the only region of India, Baba. There are many other regions. And it's not just southern and eastern India. You can almost see the further a region is from Delhi, the more it will be wiped out. So even, Gujarat, Eastern UP, Bihar, the Palas, or you can make a list of so many Hindu Shahis in Afghanistan. If you're not close to Delhi, our Latin historians just wiped you out of our history books. So our image of our history is based on what happened in Delhi. So most of us modern Indians don't realize that we were actually among the greatest seafaring nations in the world. Now, Delhi obviously was not a seafaring city, but many other regions were. But because it's not taught to us, we don't know. Right? Then the second thing, that's again with the obsessive Delhi focus, another thing that comes in, we don't get to hear of our own resistance. We have a self-image that we were a bunch of cowards who kept losing every battle for the last 1,000 years, which is not true. Our ancestors were the toughest of the ancients because they're the only ones who survived. Every other ancient civilization, when they were attacked by these invaders, well, they fought for a little while, then they surrendered. I mean, the Zoroastrian Persia, one of the greatest empires of its time, survived just 50 years when the Arabs attacked. That's it. After that, it was all finished. Nothing. 1000 साल हो गए हम अभी तक जिंदा हैं. We are still here. So we only hear the stories of our invaders, those who invaded us. We don't hear the story of our ancestors who fought those invaders, which is why we are still alive. Like any other country, the story of King Suhail Dev has been known to everyone. There'll be a statue of his in every city. We hadn't even heard of him. Chhatrapati Shivaji is reduced in our history books to a mountain rat. I mean, what nonsense. That's another thing that needs. The third thing that needs is our history of science. We don't teach anything of our scientific achievements. Many Indian historical writers will have heard of Damascus steel, but the roots of Damascus steel were actually in India. We don't know. We haven't been taught it. Pythagoras' theorem was discovered in India prior to Pythagoras. In Bodhayana Shulva Sutra is there. We don't know. So we don't get a sense that actually we are among the greatest scientist nations in the world as well. We are not taught, another thing that we are not taught is, we are taught this lie that ancient Indians never wrote and we were an oral culture, and which is why we don't have history, which is nonsense. It's not true. There are National Mission of Manuscripts has tabulated over 3.5 million manuscripts, ancient Sanskrit manuscripts. There are probably many more. This is just what the National Mission for Manuscripts has tabulated. This is more than the rest of the ancient world combined. Our ancestors wrote a hell of a lot. We are the unworthy descendants who have not translated and studied those manuscripts. So we believe the lie that is told to us was told to us by the British and repeated in our history books that our ancestors didn't write. We continue to believe the lie that the British created India, which is nonsense. It's not true. The concept of India as a nation existed many thousands of years ago. The Vishnu Puran is, mentions the concept of Bharatvarsha, and with the description, the Uttaram Yat Samudrasya Himadrash Chaiva Dakshinam, north of the ocean, south of the Himalaya. And the Vishnu Puran was composed at least 2000 years before the British formed their own nation, United Kingdom. But we are told that the British formed our nation. There are so many areas which are completely airbrushed. One doesn't even know where to begin. So all of us need to work very hard on fiction and non-fiction books. When the education system will change, I don't know. But all of us need to keep working because this impacts how we Indians see ourselves today. We see ourselves as a country created by the British. We see ourselves as descendants of cowards. We see ourselves as descendants of unscientific people. Sadly, most of us educated people, which is not true at all. And we need to bring this knowledge out.
So, Amish, very, very, pertinent points. And I'm going to take a break here. I have my own personal little rant, and as a moderator, I'm going to abuse that privilege to come out with a rant. Ratnakar, you talked about the Vijayanagar Empire. How many people know that Sion was a mathematician in the Vijayanagar Empire who first calculated the speed of light, which was about 97% accurate to the actual value measured hundreds and hundreds of years later? We are not taught that. How many people know that the legend of Birbal was manufactured by the Mughals to give a more humane, veneer to the Mughal Empire, and it was taken from the court of Krishnadev Raya, Tenali Raman? Or how many people know that when you talked about Pythagoras' theorem a few years back, a controversy erupted on Twitter, and I'll not shame them by taking their names, certain very eminent intellectuals came out and made fun of it by saying that the next thing Indians will say is that Panini was a cheese invented in India, till someone pointed out that a mathematician, a Fields Medal winner like Manjul Bhargav, said that yes, there was independent discovery of the Pythagoras' theorem hundreds of years before the its alleged invention or discovery in Greece. So I think the level of mental colonization is so deep. And to quote Professor C.K. Raju, the lies have been layered to such an extent that when you start digging, you enter into a Twilight Zone kind of a situation where you start to question your own sanity. How could so many lies be layered upon themselves, and no one has thought of peeling them back? But I'll take a stop here for my rant, and I have this next question, and again, this is for all panelists, which is that now, if you look at history, right, it's vast, both in terms of its time expanse, its geographical expanse, the number of characters you have, and whether you are writing fiction or non-fiction, how do you take and condense it into a book form without making it dry like chalk powder, or getting or writing something that is very, very academic? Or how do you not get lost in all the myriad parts that exist? Because at the end of the day, a book has to tell a story. A good book, a successful book has to tell a story. How do you manage that very, very interesting challenge? And I'll start with you, Sai.
Yes, so yes, that is a challenge that every storyteller, as well as probably even non-fiction writers, face today. Especially those with a lot of knowledge and passion, because as you said, history is really vast. So as a storyteller myself, I think it would be like it helps me when I think about what is my end goal. Is it to give the reader the end-to-end A to Z of the topic, which is next to impossible, or is it to tease the interest of the reader enough to start to make them start talking about the topic and do their own research and just tingle the interest enough so that they would find their own they would make their own discoveries and the topic itself gains mileage, and that would be the end goal of a storyteller of my genre, if I would you know aim. So that's why I would say, like, the book that I curated about Kurukshetra, for instance. So it was about unsung warriors, almost forgotten to the public memory, because Kurukshetra is all reduced to 3-4 pictures, one of Bhagavad Gita, one probably Arjuna not willing to fight Bhishma, and Krishna wanted to intervene, one of Abhimanyu, one Karna, and done. And that's not how a war that consumed 18 Akshauhinis of army, where so much of the Dvairatha Yuddha, the Gada Yuddha, the kind of arrows used, the kind of bows used, there is so much of detail, which is not just war, but it shows about it shows our metallurgy, it shows our supply chain. So a war of that magnitude cannot be just reduced to a couple of paintings, to one or two artists' whims. So what we hope is to tingle that interest enough for a reader to go and explore the original literature.
Right. Who wants to go next? Manushi, Sahana, Ratnakar?
Yeah. Oh, she's okay. I can.
Yes, please go ahead.
See, I think when you're narrating the history story, like when you're trying to reach out to the average layman viewer, see, not everybody can actually read the academic work. I mean, that's only for a selected audience. When you're presenting it to a lay audience, you have to, strike a balance. You have to strike a balance somewhere between actually what you call being factual. At the same time, you should be able to engage the audience. So, it is like at one stage you have to ensure you stick to the facts, present the facts, and get the audience interest in the historical facts or whatever happened around that period. At the same time, keep the narrating flowing maybe in a story-like manner. Okay, one thing I think where we can actually engage the reader better is like, when you're writing a story, it can be fiction as well as non-fiction. Add in as many references. Try to put in as many references so that, it actually, motivates the viewer. It sort of mitigates, gets a reader curious. Okay, let me try to find out more about it. Okay. So, that is one way in which you can actually, do both the job of engaging the reader and also trying to, increase his curiosity to keep knowing more. So.
Correct. Anyone else wants to weigh in on that? You're muted, I think, Manushi.
Yeah.
Yes.
In my case, I have written a collection of short stories of stories of valor of warriors from the 8th century till 1947. So my upcoming book is also another 52 stories of valor, and it is the continuation of Sapton Swords. So it is Sapton Swords 2. So one story of valor cannot be compressed into a very short story. It can, a big book can be written on each warrior. But when we want to cover as many warriors in one book, then we'll need to compress and include only those portions, those parts, especially of resistance, especially those parts which are very important for the readers to know. So these points are taken care of, and I write in a very simple, easy language, easily understandable to all, to readers of all age groups. So even a class 5 student can.
Did we lose her video?
Yeah, it looks like.
Okay. We'll wait for her to come back. In the meantime, Sana, did you want to also weigh in on this question?
Sure. I think of late, everybody who takes up the writing on the history does a lot of research. They visit the places. I mean, gone are the days where they used to imagine sitting at a remote location. Now they visit the places. There's a lot of research material. And the challenge is, how do you embed them? How do you call out those references? I had the challenge myself in Kashmir because there was a lot of research that went in. I had been to Kashmir also. And when I began writing, I mean, after my visit, post visiting Kashmir, the storyline had changed. Before that, I had thought of an emotional story, without these references and facts, etc. After I came back, the mindset was entirely different. I felt it would be doing sheer injustice if I'm not quoting, if I'm not drawing out the references. So I did a blend of both, and I was quite hesitant because this is not a simple story. The story doesn't move as such. It's not a very moving story. So how would be the response was what I was quite concerned about. But it so happened that after the first print was out in Kannada, the readers started asking for the list of the sources that I had referred to. So from the second print onwards, we inserted a small pamphlet or the bibliography which lists out the reference books. The reason I'm saying this is the readers are now different. I mean, they just don't want the story, or it's okay to have a very good story. But if there's enough additional material you are able to give, if there are books you are willing to suggest, people are happy to read. I mean, that's a welcome change, I guess. That has been my experience.
Right, very much so. Thanks, Sana. I see that we are running out of time. I'll ask one last question to our panelists, and then there are a few questions that have come in through the chat window, so I'll take them after that. So, okay, we are talking about periods, places, the misconceptions, distortions, and the need to tell stories about places that have not been covered in our history textbooks, or things like the wars India fought and so on. But at the end of the day, you are talking about writing a book, right? And a book is a product that needs to be read by people, and it won't be read in a world where there are so many there's so many demands on a person's time, from other books to television and OTT content, web content, to even watching something as inane as TikTok videos. Everything places a demand on the reader. And that brings me to the question that when you're talking of writing a book, is passion enough? Is knowledge enough? Is subject matter expertise enough? What else is needed? And a corollary or a supplementary question to that is, does an author's job end at writing the book? So there are two questions here. The first one is that, is passion and subject knowledge matter enough to write a good book? And you probably know where I'm going with that. And the second one is, does an author's job really end at writing the book and handing it over to the publisher? Amish, do you want to weigh in on that? I think you're...
Yeah, sorry. Firstly, I hope if you're in India, you're not watching TikTok videos. It is illegal. Look, the way it works is, the way I see it, a creative person should, for the want of a better term, almost be schizophrenic. Okay, that when you're writing your book, you have to be completely pure, right, with your heart. Okay. Now, ideally, if you're a writer, you should be articulate. You should be able to explain complex things. If you're writing a non-fiction, you should be able to explain complex things in a simple, easy manner. This is a critical skill that any communicator needs. Many of our establishment historians don't have that. The ones who've written this Delhi-obsessed history, which is good news for those who don't support that. The only way those history books would get read is if they were force-fed to us in our schools as our textbooks. Otherwise, most of those books are a cure for insomnia. They're written so badly and in such a boring manner. So if you can write something in an engaging, interesting, fun, uh, relaxed manner, as Ratnakar does, Sai Swarupa does, then it will be read. That's as far as non-fiction is concerned. In non-fiction, there's some of the things which just come instinctively. Whether you can just say a good story. Again, I know there are people who believe these things can be learned. I mean, and there are courses. I don't know. I genuinely believe it's a blessing. No, it is not like the brilliance of any individual. It's a blessing that comes, that you are just able to communicate your story. But that is about the product itself. So either you have a blessing, but make sure you communicate simply and in an engaging manner. But to your point of what you do after the book is done, this is where I think many authors make a mistake. They just hand it over to the publisher and expect the publisher to run with it. That does not happen. You have to be the CEO of your own book, which is why I said at the beginning of my answer, you have to be almost schizophrenic. So while writing the book, you should be pure and completely with your heart. But then once a book is ready and you start marketing, then become a practical, pragmatic marketing guy, wear your marketing hat, and figure out, okay, how do I sell this? So you need to have these two phases in your life as an author if you actually want to have an impact. That's the way I see it.
Very true, very true. I think if I were to remark, it's like be an artist when writing a book and be an MBA when promoting and selling your book.
Spot on.
Sai, do you concur, or let's make it interesting and let's say that you violently disagree with Amish, or you don't?
No, I mean, I agree in terms of being a CEO of your own book, and also crafting our own career as writers. A lot of us should not stop with one book, or a lot of writers that I work with, I find this problem of stopping with one book, and they are stuck with writing the second book and marketing the first book. It's many writers do that. I struggled while writing my second book. One thing is always, while writing, I think we should keep testing our own comfort zones and explore newer. This one, like when I write Puranic fiction now, I want to move to closer history for a while before I go back to my comfort zone of Mahabharata again, and or go back to more ancient, say Rigvedic. Like Avishi was one attempt to move out of my comfort zone of Mahabharata and all that. So the variety, each variety of fiction brings a new layer of learning, and we learn more and more marketing with each book. And the more books we have, the more freedom we have in experimenting each marketing technique. And I would also advocate the younger writers to try out self-publishing, because you have pricing and marketing totally in your hand. Also, please pursue every channel you have to get traditionally published, because there is a whole distribution channel that we don't want to lose. But having self-published books always gives us that edge to experiment with pricing and see, do that A/B testing and see what succeeds, what doesn't succeed. So yes, we have to be very active with marketing.
Good. That's a VC analyst, speaking from her brain. Absolutely. Ratnakar, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, see, I don't know. Okay, when I'm writing something, it could be a book, it would be a blog, or it would be an article. See, I follow a simple process. Think like a reader. Typically, when you're writing something, people often tend to lose themselves. They often tend to get too indulgent. They just keep writing. They see this is my view. I'm not sure how many people agree with me on this panel or whether not. But I feel that we should be thinking like a reader. Like when you write it, just see like, okay, if I'm a reader, how does this look to me? So in a way that I think that helps you to actually reach out to the user. See, my credo is simple. When you're writing something, it should reach out to as many people as possible. That is my philosophy. I mean, you're writing an article in a newspaper or you're writing a book. Make sure that the book whatever your message goes to the people. And so that is where you have to start thinking like a readers, trying to see how it can relate it to the reader and how the narrative can be shaped. Like you ask the first thing, is subject and knowledge matter enough? No, that's not enough. I mean, just having subject knowledge matter does not do. I mean, if only subject knowledge matter is there, Wikipedia is there. You'll just be writing Wikipedia, that's all.
Very true, very true. That
Only that matters, I can just go to Wikipedia. But see, the reason why I read a book or an article is to see the kind of narrative and perspective which you are giving. Your perspective might be biased. I mean, it might be biased, it might be politically incorrect, but that's your perspective. See, as a writer, you got to speak from within. It's not like what somebody said, it is your views. Whether they are good, bad, or ugly, let the readers decide. So that is my perspective out here.
Very true. Sahana, I'll go to you. So when writing Kashir, did you at any point during the writing or after that put on the reader's hat? And if you did, what kind of changes did you find yourself making to your book?
I did put on the reader's hat, and I found that a few places are not very easy to read, to be very honest, and I still couldn't take them out because there is a portion which takes you along very easily. It's a story. But when there are facts regarding Kashmir's political history or Article 370, what I did is I made use of the technique. The entire topic of Article 370 is discussed as an article which appears in a newspaper. So I had to leverage different techniques because when discussing the philosophical concepts, they've come as the conversations between Kailash Pandit and Narendra for that matter. So I've discovered a few techniques, but yes, overall, there still are places which are very technical, very difficult to kind of not very difficult, but yes, you will have to you take time to comprehend. But I had got the version read through by Dr. Bhairappa sir and Shatabdani Dr. R. Ganesh ji, and they all concurred and they agreed that let it be there. I mean, let this be an exception. So yes, that does happen, and we'll have to decide, and it has to be based on the topic and the theme that you are writing about. Sometimes it becomes very easy to iron them out. Sometimes they will have to stay, and because of which, for that very reason, many students were interested in us looking for the original source, and then I had to share the names, etc.
Interesting, very interesting. And Manushi, your
Sorry, Abhinav, can I just take a minute because
yes, please.
I have a call. Manushi, I'm so sorry to disturb you. Because I had a call. I was told actually this will be around an hour. I have a call scheduled with the High Commission, so I need to.
So no worries,
I'm
Amish.
in London, you know that, right? I'm in the
Correct.
So I've just got a message on that already.
No, thank you for making the time. And folks, you can always ping Amish with your questions on Twitter, and I'll share some of the questions with you, separately, Amish. But thank you so much for making the time and answering our questions. Thank you.
Manushi, my sincere apologies for disturbing you, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. Thank you. Bye. Bye, guys. Bye.
So Manushi, my question was, so your book is a collection of stories, right? It's not a full, a single novel as such. It's Saffron Soldiers is a collection of many, many stories. So did you also face the challenge there? If I put on my reader's hat, then some of the content needs to be perhaps rewritten, or how did you overcome the challenge of making the book appealing, chapter after chapter, story after story to the reader? You're muted. You're still muted. Yes.
Yeah, it is a collection of 52 short stories of valor of warriors from each and every corner of Bharat, spanning from the 8th century to 1947. And once I completed the book, I first gave it to my neighbor to read. And I also sought opinion from my husband as well. I gave him the manuscript to read. And altogether, 3 people read the book and they gave their feedback on the language and everything. And then I reworked on the book, and once or twice I got it edited by myself and then by another editor, and that's how it got published.
Okay, very nice. So, we are at the end of the discussion, and there are a few questions that have come in from the chat, in the chat window. So I'm going to go through some of them and open them up for our panelists. So, Ratnakar, Sahana, Manushi, Sai, please feel free, any of you, to answer those. So there's a question for Sahana specifically. So it says, question for Sahana ji, how hard was it to research for your book? Did you get a chance to travel to Kashmir? I think you answered that. Or interact with the Pandit community? You're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I did travel to Kashmir, and I just want to answer this question, which will also reference back to one of the questions about the manuscripts. Now, with respect to Kashmir, there is a very famous chronicle called Rajatarangini, which is written by Kalhana. And none of us know that such a chronicle exists. Kashmir's very own script was Sharda script, and even today in Kashmir University's Iqbal Library, there are thousands of manuscripts lying. And this Rajatarangini was also originally written in Sharda script. And there was a Hungarian scholar by name Dr. Aurel Steen who happened to investigate on this. And when he started searching for this manuscript, there was just one copy, and it was with 2 siblings. They had split it into 2 because of inheritance feud. With all the other property, they had split it into 2. Dr. Steen had to convince them, get the 2 copies, merge them into one. Sharda script had to be transcribed into Devanagari. And because he was a scholar in Devanagari, he further translated it into English. Now, this is the fate of our scripts. There's a myth that there were no scribes, there is nothing to do about ancient India. No. All the Ashoka scripts were uncovered by James Prinsep. He began that in the 19th century. We got the Arthashastra in the early 20th century when Shama Shastri discovered it. It's not that content isn't there, but the question is very valid. We do not know how do we begin, where do we begin, what do we refer to. Thankfully, when I traveled, I met with Dr. Kailash Panditaji, who in fact guided me. And then I got to know there is this Rajatarangini, and then I got hold of a Kannada copy. Thankfully, there was a Kannada translation. And Rajatarangini is a wonderful book. It's a chronicle which begins right from the inception of Kashmir up to 15th century AD. Kalhana is succeeded by Jona Raja, who succeeds and who is succeeded by Srivara. All these 3 together have put down a list of all the kings that ruled, and it's a very wonderful story. And one king, Lalitaditya Muktapida from the Karkota dynasty, was an emperor of India, literally. He ruled the entire India. It was in the 8th century AD. He was the one who sent out these Turushkas, or the Muslim invaders. He successfully stopped them from getting into the Kashmir region. They had to surrender. He made them shave half of their heads as a mark of surrender. And he was an absolutely brilliant king. But none of us know about it. History textbooks don't tell you because they themselves don't know. We don't know how many more Rajataranginis exist for different provinces or regions of India. Kashmir is just one among them. So yes, I had difficulty getting hold of these, and there was the other challenges of talking to people, because when I visited, Article 370 was still in place. So there were other challenges in talking to people. I could not commute as planned because there were my very good friends who were along with me, but everything was a challenge. We would plan and there would suddenly be stone pelting and there would be curfew. We had to change our plan, etc. But yes, it was a very eye-opening journey for me. And post that, when I began writing, as somebody was pointing out, when it comes from your own experience, you just don't care about what's happening, what the reader is going to think, because this is what I've experienced, this is what I'm feeling right now, and I'm going to put it into words. So that was my experience.
Very true. There is a comment from Kavita, and she says that Saffron Swords has to be one of the most influential books in recent times. Thank you for this. Hope there are more in this series. And you said that Saffron Swords Part 2 is in the works and coming out. Also, such a book needs to be made into a web series, and I really hope it does. It is made. There is one question, and it's not addressed to anyone specifically. It says that Lord Macaulay's address to the British Parliament on the 23rd of February 1835, with facts as WhatsApp spread images called as fake without actual work. Any book worked on this, and what is its name? If anyone knows, they can answer this. But Thomas Babington Macaulay's address to the British Parliament, that entire note is available on the web. Please don't go by WhatsApp images that are spread and so on. One of Arun Shoury's books reproduced that entire minute, word for word, so you can reference that, or you can go to the net. It's a longish note, several pages in length, but please don't go by WhatsApp forwards. So there's one question to the panelists, and this is from Kush Desai. All of you spoke passionately about how much of Indian history has been brushed over in our British education system. Do you think the new education policy introduced by the current dispensation will have any effect on this? Anyone wants to wager an answer on this? I have my own thoughts, but I'll wait for others to weigh in.
I don't know, at least new education policy, I mean, I did hear something about some textbooks being changed, and I heard a statement by the previous HRD that we are proud we haven't changed a single line. So honestly speaking, I'm not expecting much. Whatever. I mean, there were suggestions, there were calls for suggestions, calls for saying we do this, but there's a proof of the pudding is in the eating. I'm just waiting for it.
Thank you, Ratnakar. I won't say anything because you have said what I was going to say in any case. But anyone else wants to counter?
We can only believe once these stories are there in the textbooks for children.
Very true, very true. We will see it, we will believe it when we see it. Okay. So this is an interesting one, and I think we may take just one more question after this. Ajit asks, to all the panelists, many of us were taught that discrimination towards women is ingrained in Hindu society in the form of child marriages or mistreatment of widows. Are there any evidences against such narratives that portray the Hindu society as discriminative? And my own 2 cents are that please read the originals, which will disabuse anyone and everyone of such narratives. And I think the communists, leftists, and the Britishers probably relied upon the fact that very few of us would go and read the originals. But since it's a question for the panelists, I'll let them answer.
So if I can venture a response here, Abhinav, women being discriminated against is not a part of our itihasa at least, because the Mahabharata itself, as I said, each woman has her own unique journey, right? And the agency that women had during the time of Mahabharata is something, it's like stunningly, it has stunning variety, like the way Shakuntala used her choice and stood up for herself. When Dushyanta refused to recognize her, she showed him his place in, no ambiguous terms. She had the courage to tell him, you think that I am desiring your kingdom. What is your kingdom before what I can command? My father created a totally different universe. My mother dances in the presence of Indra, Vishnu, Vaikuntha, Kailasha and all. And you are thinking that I am, behind your stupid kingdom. But I am only seeking your I've come to you because my son is the rightful heir, and it is his dharma to rule this kingdom after you, and I'll make sure he does it. So she has come prepared with the whole argument about and she's not weak here. So Vyasa's heroines are not weak. Ancient women were not weak at all. And
Correct.
coming to Savitri, right? That's a more interesting this one, because again, Sati Savitri is being such a vilified phrase as to, that denotes very submissive women or whatever, but that is such a wrong thing, because the way Savitri's father speaks to her and tells her to choose her own husband. He says, I am not able to find any prince who is fitting, who is eligible to hold your hand. So why don't you take a tour of Bharatvarsha, to just tour the whole land, observe princes or eligible bachelors, and make the choice yourself. And how many fathers today would say that to their daughters? So, I mean, I know it says a lot about the society we live in also, but the society, Indian society then had that ecosystem where an unmarried princess can travel all along the land, talking to strangers and trying to make her decision about, about her marriage. And does today's India offer what Mahabharata's India offered the women? No, right?
And Sai, you have touched upon the Mahabharata, and I have to, I can't stop myself. So if you read the original, the Vyasa Mahabharata, there Shakuntala tells Dushyant that your existence is as small as a bilva seed. I am like a mountain. So let's not even have a comparison there. Satyavati is the one who gets the best out of Yamraj. I mean, look at it. And Gandhari, in the entire Mahabharata, there is only once that a god is cursed, Krishna is cursed, and by none other than Gandhari, who becomes essentially the driver of the destruction of the Yadav, lineage 36 years later. So, yeah. So my humble
and
request.
It's not just Mahabharata. Like, say, the recent history, we have Ahalya Bai Holkar, who was ready to commit Sati Sahagamana, but her father-in-law stopped her and encouraged her to look at the kingdom and affairs. And the turnaround that she has brought, in like that period was fraught with so much of invasions, temple desecrations, and the turnaround that Ahilya Bai Holkar single-handedly brought around reconstruction of temples and all that. And history is fraught with such counter-narrative filled examples.
I just realized we are running out of time. So if anyone wants to just add one final point, maybe just 1 minute. Yes, please.
See, adding to Sai's point, apart from Ahilya Bai Holkar, one more example I can give is Rani Durgavati. She was born at Rajput, but her husband was a Gaun, and she actually stood firm, saying that, I don't care if my husband is not a the husband and the person I'm going to marry is not a Rajput. He's a Rajput by his deeds. And she actually married she married him. She married into the Gaun kingdom, and when her husband died, she not just took over the kingdom, she ruled it wisely, and she also defied the Mughal Empire. She stood up to Akbar, she stood up to one of the mightiest Mughal empires. She stood up to Akbar, fought till the end, and when defeat was imminent, instead of surrendering to the Mughal Empire, she preferred to kill herself to death. And this was in the medieval ages. I mean, we hear about how medieval ages was supposedly a dark era in Indian history, and Rani Durgavati is one more shining example of how women had the independence to, in many ways.
Correct.
Yeah, I would like to add to Ashtai Swarupaji, Abhinavji, and Ratnakarji. There are thousands of carvings in ancient and medieval era temples across the country of women practicing the art of warfare, women performing gymnastics, women seated in thrones as rulers, and women reading and writing. So there are many thousands of examples across the country in the ancient and medieval era temples. These temples are history in stone. So if we Bharatiyas spend some time visiting these ancient shrines and study the carvings, we will get to know a lot about the real history of India.
And I also want to make a quick point. Even before the Mahabharata war commenced, this is in Rajatarangini again, Gonanda was the contemporary of Yudhishthira, and he was a relative of Jarasandha of Magadha. So when invaded by Gonanda, Gonandiya dynasty, the first dynasty of Kashmir, and Gonanda goes in support of Jarasandha and gets killed by Balrama. Gonanda's son, Damodara, wants to avenge this. When he again tries killing, he is killed by Krishna. They go to Gandhara for Swayamvara of the princess, and now Damodara is killed by Krishna. Now Damodara's wife is pregnant, and the Kashmir does not have any successor, and that was the very first time when a woman was coronated. Shri Krishna coronates the pregnant woman, Yashovati is the name of the lady, and she becomes a queen. She delivers, and then is born this Gonanda too. When he is a small boy, Mahabharata war ensues. So what Kauravas and Pandavas do is they send emissaries to all other regions to participate or take the side of any of them, but they don't send anybody to Kashmir because Gonanda is a very small boy. This also talks about the ethics. We had these Dharma Yuddha, we have the concepts of Dharma Vijayi, Lobha Vijayi, and Asura Vijayi, etc. So Yashovati was the first lady who was coronated, who was pregnant, and this was done by Krishna, and this was much before the Mahabharata war.
Thank you, Sahana, and we are completely out of time. I see that Ranjit Dubey has a question. I won't, and it's addressed to me, but if you can ask this on Twitter, I'll be more than happy to answer it. I'll turn this back to, I'll turn this back over. Thank you so much from Amish and Sai and Sahana and Manushi and Ratnakar. Fabulous session. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Abhinav. It was a really great session.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was
and well moderated.
wonderful.
You did a great job moderating. Thank you.